So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th session of the Innovator Training Scheme Webinar series. My name is Alessandro, and I'm Translational Research Manager at the university, and I manage Translation Manchester. As you know, at Translation Manchester, we've been working very closely with the BRC in the past few months to deliver this program of training, which is around innovation and commercialization of research. Today's session is hosted by our colleagues at Health Innovation Manchester, Nick Allen and Paul Hamner, who will be guiding us through tips and advice on how to pitch your innovation to a commercial audience. Paul and Nick listen to hundreds of innovator pitches every year as part of the Step into Healthcare program and the Innovation Nexus. They provide training to researchers and the industry that want to bring their innovation into the NHS. And today they will provide some of that training to us. So before we get started, may I just remind you a little bit of Zoom etiquette. If it would be great if you could keep your microphone on mute and the camera off during the presentations. However, if you do have any question, please pop them in the chat even during the presentation. And at the end of the talks, there will be some time to ask them directly, so you can raise your virtual hand during the Q&A session. On the slide here, you can see the program of the day. So we will start from a talk from Nick about Procurement Conundrum, followed by Paul, and after both presentations, there will be the Q&A session, which will be really an open discussion. So I kindly ask you to take part to it because it's part of the learning. We will then have a short break, comfort break, and then we'll be back for an example of a good pitch. So to see all that advice really coming into practice with an example of a successful pitch. And finally, there will be another session, 10 minutes at the end, in which we can reflect on the learning and ask further questions to our experts. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Nick for his presentation. As mentioned before, Nick is Industry Procurement Advisor at Health Innovation Manchester. He provides advice to SMEs that want their innovation to be implemented in the NHS. And today he will tell us about the Procurement Conundrum. Thanks, Nick, and the audience is all yours. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you see that, guys? Yeah, that's good, that's good. Right, my background is procurement. I've been a head of procurement at various hospitals around the country, and I've been in post in Health Innovation Manchester for about, I think this is my 6th year. And I've always had a leaning towards the smaller supplier, the small to medium enterprise. So when this particular role came up to help innovation get into the NHS, I sort of jumped at the opportunity. Every single day is different, and Paul and I meet with lots of suppliers. He's the clinical master, and I've got the procurement sort of master head on. And I've also sold to the NHS when I was in Basingstoke Hospitals in 2000, 2001. I sort of picked up the gauntlet to get e-enabled on e-quote, e-tender, etc. Got a company down, and we worked on something. It was absolutely amazing, the journey we went on, and I ended up working for the company, but I had to get on the other side of the table and start to contact people and try to get the gig, I call it, get the first meeting, and slowly over time I started to get really good at it, and I ended up over about 9-year period having 60 hospitals using this procurement software. So all the things that I know and have learned in that time, I share with people. But I also know that it's difficult, and I get frustrated, as Paul does, with how slow. It's like going into a washing machine full of treacle sometimes, and you're treading through the treacle. So when I was asked to do this presentation, I thought, well, it is a bit of a conundrum. So I've called it the Procurement Conundrum and how to win mindsets. Right. When I go sometimes to do presentations, I sometimes have to go and speak to clinicians. I had to go to clinical commissioning groups, CCGs, and sometimes you have to try and win them over, because sometimes some of the innovations, they're not for the hospital, they're for the people outside in the community, and that they're commissioned by clinical commissioning groups, GPs basically. And I've said to some of them in meetings, what do you know about innovation? Silence. And that can be quite daunting when you're there with a load of clever people. So I basically say to them, look, if you keep doing the same thing week in, week out, and month in, month out, and expect different outcomes, it's insanity. So I always put that up there to try and get them to think that, you know, the reason why I'm there, or some of my colleagues are there, is to try and shake them up a little bit so that they think differently, so that they can accept some of the innovative stuff that comes our way. Now, I do believe there's some young students on the event this morning, early days, people who are maybe looking at innovating something as the months and the years go on. And we've got some clinicians on, and we've got some maybe early development stage innovators. So I've been asked to try and make sure I don't go down the road of, you know, just aiming at the ones who are already nearly there. Let's just let's take a step back as well, to just let some of those younger people know how things start off in procurement in the NHS. Just, it's always best to be forearmed, isn't it? Forewarned. I don't know which way around that one is. But what normally happens is somebody has a need in a department, and they get together and they start talking about this particular need, and they have to do something, and they have to develop a sort of specification. And what they also have to do is, in public sector law, you can't just say this is what I want, put it out there, and then get the auditor and say I like them. You have to actually have a special selection and award criteria set up, because it won't just be one person dictating, right, we're going to use them. There's a little panel, and the panel get the bids that come in, and they look at what the award criteria is. So typically it could be 50% of your marks would go against quality, 40% price, and there's a new aspect now called social value that came in a few years ago. And it's if it's a big costing, if it's a big price tender, it's 500,000, 250,000, 2 million, whatever it could well be, they're looking to see if the supplier, the winning supplier, would put something back into the, for argument's sake, Greater Manchester. Would they employ people? Would they do whatever it might well be? What would they do to put back in? So that forms part of the selection and award criteria. And sometimes when it's so close on price, it could be something as small as somebody putting social value in to do something in the community that could just tip it in favour. Then there's a selection questionnaire that goes out to the suppliers. They then set some, the ITT, the invitation to tender, goes out onto an electronic website, normally Contracts Finder or Tenders Electronic Daily. And then what happens is that the expressions of interest come in, they look, the panel get together, they score it as per whatever the selection or criteria. And then following some presentations, interviews, the ones that have been whittled down, they then notify all the losers they've lost, because some years ago there was a contentious thing happened, and they called it the Alcatel cooling off period. 10 days has to wait, so it gives them a chance to, you know, come back and say, look, you know, we're not happy with this, we're not happy with that. And once all that's sort of out the way, they then award it to the winner. The winner gets notified that they've won the tender. So it's quite a complicated little process. For those who are young, they might think, what the hell's all this? But there's they could be classed as ponds of opportunities. Where do buyers in the NHS and contracts managers put their bids, their opportunities? One is on the ODU Tenders Electronic Daily, European Daily website. One's on the Contracts Finder, which is a brand new government portal, it's a few years old. And then locally to you, NIHR Business Services is in Salford. They run tenders. Then you've got the NHS Supply Chain, which is a large organisation that's been split up into a new future operating model now, 11 towers. So there's different places that people, if you've got something, it's ready to go, where you can go and fish, for argument's sake, to try and win a tender. And you can approach each, you know, individual trust. You'd need to get hold of a champion, a clinical champion potentially, who loves the product, and he or she might be able to help you with winning the day over. Another way how to infiltrate the NHS is to go through your nearest AHSN, and we are an AHSN in Manchester, and there's 15 of us around the country, all over the place, and we are the bridge, if you like, or the sort of the network to try and help innovators get into the hospital trusts in those geographical areas. And you can go on to the Atlas, which is the AHSN network, and see where the HSNs are. Another thing, when you're getting ready for maybe starting to show people what your new innovation is, you need to start thinking about, well, where are you now? What do they do now, etc. And what is the, how much does it cost to do an operation, or how much does it cost to run through a patient through that pathway? And how well does yours compare? It could be a device, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be an IT digital platform that takes away a lot of the dross. So how much would it cost to adopt your product as opposed to doing it the other way? And it's the value proposition that we're going to be talking about later on. Paul and I will have a bit of fun with that. And that's what wins people over. What's the problem, etc., etc. Understanding what your new product does. So this is something that somebody asked me to do once. What's the winning formula? Now, miss the pink one just for now, but it's basically blue and green. The winning formula for getting something into the NHS, if it's a lower price and it offers a better outcome, got to be a golden ticket. If it's the same price and a better outcome, for me, that's a golden ticket. You would be surprised to learn that there are some people who come to us, some it's the same price and it's the same outcome. So why would we change? And we try to say to them, why would we want to change? And they get, well, I won't say they get argumentative, but they try to stand their corner and say, well, ours is just as good. Well, yeah, it might well be, but nobody's going to change for the same price they make them. And every now and again, something comes along which is slightly worsely priced, and that's the same outcome, and that's not going to get anywhere. So I was in Birmingham doing a talk once, and I said, I did this, there was only the 2 boxes, and this guy stood up and said, but what happens if it's a slightly higher price and a better outcome? And I had to agree, he's right. We would take something that was a slightly higher price and it gave a better outcome, because there's a thing called value-based procurement, which is starting to gain momentum now in the NHS. If you pay a little bit more for something and the patient has a good outcome and doesn't need to come back in a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's got to be a golden ticket, and it is for me. Now, this particular, just bear with me, my damn phone is ringing. I'm going to turn it off. Sorry about that. Don't want that ringing. Right, this company here called Eurolift, they came to us through our Innovation Nexus, and they had a product which was these little implants which went into the prostate, which opened the prostate, as you can see in the diagram. And a surgeon, a urologist surgeon in Stepping Hill Hospital, Stockport, Andrew Sinclair, was using this on private patients, and he wanted to use it for NHS patients. So we came across a bit of the conundrum thing. We came across something that there was no budget to buy them, yet there was 36 minutes it took to do this operation, and the guy could go home after an hour. With the normal procedure, as in invasive surgery, going up the back passage with scalpels and things to go at the prostate, they were in hospital for nearly 3 nights, and there was bleeding, there was drugs, and there was and the cost was high, but there was no budget to buy the damn implants. So we had to get hold of the clinical commissioning group, and we had to bring them into a meeting at the surgeon's office in Stepping Hill with the supplier, and they realized, there's a tariff payment scheme, and we had to change the coding on the tariff. That took nearly 6 months. And as it was, this particular product got onto the innovation technology tariff scheme that the NHS England were running, and slowly we were able to use it. Now, this product now is used across Manchester, Greater Manchester, and gentlemen who have issues with the prostate can all relax and go and have that procedure. And it's half an hour and no blades, no stay in hospital, go down, have a rest after an hour, and they can go home and get on with their lives. When we work in our organization, we have this Innovation Nexus portal, and it's that pipeline in the orange there, and all those little, they look like UFOs flying in, don't they? Well, they're the suppliers who come and see Paul and I, and we meet with them, and I offer procurement advice, Paul offers clinical advice, and we then can signpost them to different NHS Shared Business Services in Salford, because it could be ready to go. We could signpost them into the 11 towers, which is NHS supply chain and these tower service providers, to get traction to get into the hospital system. Or it could be a slow process of having to have a clinical evaluation where I might have to take it to the heads of procurement who I work with in Greater Manchester. They might want to trial it, etc., etc. And then we might need to create a value proposition and a business case, and then a purchase order is raised. And it's all, Paul and I are trying to get as many suppliers over the finishing line there to enable some of the innovations to break into the NHS. One of the suppliers who came our way a few years ago, 3 years ago, is a Manchester-based company, and they created some district nurse scheduling software, and they created it in conjunction with Salford Royal Hospital. And we managed to get some funding for them so that they could create that little trial with Salford. And it was a roaring success, and they went on to, get other hospital trusts using this software. Saves a lot of money, a lot of time, and obviously a lot of better patient outcomes, because the nurses could see more patients in a day because of how it all worked. Anyway, coming up to the November in 2018, I said to them, look, there's an NWPD Northwest Procurement Development Award for best suppliers. So with about 3 days to go, they put their bid, submitted their application, and the evening was at the Midland in Manchester, and I was there that night, and I saw them there, before the awards was done, and lo and behold, they won the best non-clinical, and also they ended up winning Supplier of the Year, 2 awards they won, and that was us working with them and then just pushing them to put their name forward. So, Paul and I and our colleagues were always looking for opportunities for the suppliers, always trying to help them in any way we possibly can. This particular slide here shows how we also can help with some of the suppliers who've got innovative stuff. So there's the AHSNs I mentioned before, 15 of us around the country. Well, there's a new platform called Health Tech Connect. It's changing over to the NHS Innovation Service shortly. So that Health Tech Connect there will be called NHS Innovation Service. And we can push new products or new services onto that platform. And the AHSN networks, the 15 of us, certain individuals will do a first stage review, a little bit like Paul and I meeting with a supplier. We'll meet with them and we'll try and see where they fit. And then Supply Chain Coordination Limited and the 11 towers get to see some of this innovation. And it's up to them then to see if they can pull that through onto their contracts or one of their contracts, or create a contract if it's brand new. And my magnificent 7 things, and Paul will touch on this shortly, so I won't steal his thunder, but that's basically our sort of magnificent 7 things. So I'm not going to touch on that one because he's going to go into a little bit more detail on that one. And also getting past gatekeepers. I have a funny story to tell. My wife obviously sometimes listens to me talking to people and trying to help and stuff. And she said, "Oh, you sound so good. Could you get me into Harrods?" Because my wife's got these alternative therapy products, ancient Egyptian healing rods. Go away. Just bear with me. I'll have to ring. I can't even turn it off. So she said to me, "How can I, help her get into the Harrods?" So when I first started selling those that software called MultiQuote, I mentioned early on about getting that supplier in, and I ended up working for them. I got taught by these clever older guys from IBM, software sales guys, and I basically would contact someone and say, "My name is Nick Allen. Could you please kindly let me know what the correct protocols are to do business with your organization in regards to the products I sell?" So I contacted Al Fayed's PA, found out her name, and rung her up and said, "Hi, my name's Nick Allen. I wonder whether you could let me know what the correct protocols are with regards to doing business with Harrods in relation to the products that my wife sells." So she said, "What are those products?" And I said, "They're ancient Egyptian healing rods." "Oh my God," she says, "Mr. Al Fayed's Egyptian, he'll know about these. You need to speak to so-and-so, so-and-so." So I said, "Could you get me, an email to his PA, copy me in, and we'll do it that way." She did that, sorted with her PA. Next thing is my wife and I is on the train down to London, opposite Harrods in the big building there. We're in their sort of suite of rooms where they do all the negotiations. I'm in there, I'm doing all the typing, my wife's doing the talking. And then just as I'm about to start doing the presentation, the slide by slide thing, this guy puts his hand on my arm. He says, "Nick, how did you get this on?" And I said, "Well, I contacted Al Fayed's PA and said, 'My name is Nick Allen,' and told him the story, and he laughed." So it does work. And that, using those lines, "Would you let me know what the correct protocols are to initiate a meeting?" They would never have got, those people will never be spoken to like that before. And it's different. It's a different approach. So that, there you are saying, "What's the correct protocol?" You've engaged them, and they're going to tell you what the correct protocol is. And then when they also normally say, "What are your services?" Then you've got them big time. This is what it does. This is, and I used to win an awful lot of my first meetings doing things that way. And that's me. And we'll have a Q&A after Paul's presentation. His goes into a little bit more detail. So I hope it was good for those of you who were some way down the line, and those that are not yet to that place, just a little insight as to how and what can be expected. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. That was a very informative presentation. If you have any question for Nick, please pop them in the chat. They will be answered after the next talk. Actually, I do have some questions for you, Nick, but I'll wait for that later. So without further ado, we can move to our second talk of the day, Paul Hamner. Paul manages the innovation nexus within Health Innovation Manchester, amongst other things. And today we'll focus this talk on essential to pitching. So it will give us some very good advice on how to build the perfect pitch. And Paul, thanks for coming, and go whenever you're ready.
Hi, Alessandro, thanks for that. You can see my screen, yeah?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks for inviting me along today. Thanks for everybody for coming along and listening to us. Just an explanation about the template that I'm using today. So I put together some new slides for today. And you'll have seen Nick's template, which is our usual Health Innovation Manchester template. It's very professionally produced. And I thought probably people look at the slide decks and think, well, I can't produce anything like that. So I thought, well, I'll just do it from scratch. And I selected a template from PowerPoint. Nothing special. It was the first one that came along. I wanted to make it as easy as possible. just took the first one out of the box. And what I wanted to show was there's kind of no excuse really for not producing something that looks halfway professional, because there's so much free content available that you can just set it up and set it going very, very quickly. What I'm going to do as well throughout the talk is point you in the direction of free resources that will help you to make your pictures look better. So there'll be little tick boxes as we go through. So come on. There we go. It's a bit slow. There's a bit of a delay. So one of the things that I'm not going to do, I'm not going to give you a big salesy type training course, partly because I'm not very good at sales, but also you don't have to be very good at sales to pitch. It's kind of like a basic thing that you can do, and I found this quote, and it always makes me chuckle. My friends and I will often throw this to each other when sales comes up, and it's ABC. Always be closing, and it kind of sums up a bit of the cutthroat mentality, if you like, of selling. So I haven't got a cutthroat mentality. You probably haven't either. But there will be opportunities where you need to pitch, and you know, pitching is a kind of universal. Our pets do it to us when they want something, and I think one of the characteristics of a pitch is that you're asking for something. So it makes sense before you design your pitch to be very clear about what you're asking. It seems fundamental. Now, I've tried to pull out some of the tips from the 200 or so innovators we see every year. And you'd be surprised the amount of people who go through really good presentations. And Nick and I will sit there at the end and say, yeah, but what is it you want? And that is the reason that they're giving the presentation. So before you pitch, know what you want. What is your, and we call it the ask. And then ask yourself, is my ask realistic? Now, it's difficult maybe to know that, but you could ask your colleagues, your peers. You could actually ask the people that you're pitching to, you know, is that a realistic request from you? And then, of course, are you asking the right person? If you're asking the wrong person, you won't get what you want. And just before we leave this slide, just to draw your attention, a little tip here. So the picture of the Chihuahua downloaded for free from a site called Pixabay. So if you Google Pixabay, you can register, or you can just download as a guest. You can actually upload pictures yourself if you're into photography for others to use. So if you attribute it, it's free. You can also make a donation, and there is access to other paid for images. But that's a really good tip if you're trying to make your slide decks look quite professional, you know, on a very limited budget. So kind of expanding on the ask a little bit, the common asks that we see are for funding. Now, in an NHS perspective, it's quite unlikely that the NHS, you know, a hospital or the procurement guys will fund your innovation. What is more likely is that they will work with you maybe to apply for grant funding. So again, in terms of what your ask is, what is reasonable. Obviously, if you were pitching to investors, funding would be, you know, the one of the primary outputs. The second ask that we often see is for opinion / feedback. Now, I think this is a bit of a dangerous ask, really, because it can be a kind of a cover for, I don't really know what I want. I'm just telling you about it to see what you think. If your ask is opinion and feedback, you know, put some specific questions in. You know, would you use this? Where would this be used? And maybe you could even consider pointing people to an online poll or something so that you could get some information. I've actually done, it wasn't really a pitch, but I went to a conference once with a bowl of, a tub of roses, sweets, and went around and just basically accosted people and said, oh, would you like a sweet? And they said, oh, yes. And I said, oh, could I have your opinion on these questions? So you can kind of do it anywhere. And then, you know, another very common one is sales to the NHS. I think probably in terms of the reasonableness of the ask, what you're really usually asking for is an evaluation or entering the sales process, because as Nick said, there are some you know, well-defined routes to sales within the NHS, which are formal responses to tenders. Another little tip there, I kind of squeezed in a word map. And again, there's a free site there if you were thinking of putting that into a presentation. Just while we're on funding, a word in your ear about funding. So Health Innovation Manchester are compiling a kind of compendium of opportunities, usually commercial funding opportunities, grant funding. We also run a yearly fund for proof of principle evaluations. If you want information about that, obviously you can email me or get in touch through Alessandro, or the best way is really to sign up on this by following this link, which will put you on our mailing list, and you'll get funding updates and also other opportunities as they arise. Another little picture there that I found on a site called Unsplash, which is another free site for pictures. So have a look at that one. And you can kind of search as well. I don't know what to search for to get two meerkats talking to each other. I'll have to look at my notes on that one. So we've talked about the ask, but are you pitching to the right audience? And you really need to think who's going to make the decision to give you what you want, who is going to influence the decision, and also who needs to be consulted. And how often, if you have pitched before, how often have we been asked to pitch and we've turned up at an event and we don't really know who's going to be there? So are we going to get what we want? You know, we might be pitching to an audience of people who are themselves waiting to pitch to the audience of people. So I think you've got to be quite professional about it and think, you know, go to the places where the people who can give you what you want are going to be congregated, and then pitch, and you'll have a much more successful track record if you do that. In terms of the NHS, I've shown this slide before at another seminar, but just to try and make sense of who could potentially be in the audience. You could be pitching to any of these groups or a mixture of these groups, and what their motivations are and how much influence they have on the purchasing decision in this case. And you can see that perhaps certain audiences will be more interested in the clinical and technical aspects of what you're pitching. Others will be more interested in the cost benefit. So again, the very clear message is that you will need different pitch decks for each audience. You might say, well, if it's a mixed audience, well, Nick and I actually saw somebody just before the meeting who went through a pitch deck. It was very good, actually. They'd been in a couple of accelerators, and you could see that they'd been trained in how to pitch. They had a clear ask at the end. But what they did was they put down their asks and said, now we realise that you might not be able to help us with all of these asks, you know, but we're particularly interested in these. So if you want to reduce the work and just have a single pitch deck, but I would recommend that you have different pitch decks for different audiences. So coming on to the pitch itself, this is a quote from Eric Morecambe, that he was playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. And I think a pitch stands and fails on its structure. Structure is very, very important. So I'll give you a structure that you can follow. And I think that you need a number of different tools in your briefcase, if you like. So your pitch arsenal. Probably if you're a clinician, you're a researcher, you're very comfortable giving a standard presentation. So that could be 20 more minutes. The venue will be a conference, an exhibition, maybe you're on a panel. It's good for communicating complicated concepts and technical information. There's lots of slides, but you're probably not going to tailor it to a specific audience just because it's too time consuming to produce a slide like that repeatedly and change it. Now, we see a lot of these standard presentations when people come to pitch to us, and it's just overkill, really. So we try and encourage them. I've never seen a presentation I don't think that is bad. It's just not a pitch. So we come on to what we call the longer pitch, which is 3 to 5 minutes. And as I said, the characteristic of a pitch is that it contains an ask. That's really the difference between that and a standard presentation. So lots of different venues where you can do these pitches. You'll probably be presenting to a small group, but you could present it at a larger venue. It's concise, it's impactful, and it's designed to impart the essential information. So less is more. Few slides, visual, minimal text. Your aim with the pitch is to get your foot in the door. I call it a bit like a big business case. Yeah, sorry, a big business card. So you put your business card in, you might follow the standard presentation at a later date. And then there's the elevator pitch, which is 30 to 60 seconds. Now, like I say, these are the basics, and I would say, oh, it's fundamental. Why wouldn't people know how to construct an elevator pitch? But I was thinking back to my days when I was a PhD student, and there was a program that we got entered in at the end of our PhD studentship, which we laughed and said it was a bit like a rehabilitation for the normal world. It covered things like, you know, when you get a job, how are you going to interact with people, how are you going to sell, how do you use your business card, how do you network, all these kind of things. And that was the introduction for me anyway, as a 20-year-old or so, to the elevator pitch. And there is a little bit of an art into it, but the characteristics are about 30 to 60 seconds. The venue, the archetypal elevator, it's chance encounters with people that could potentially help you on your way. It needs to be memorable and engaging. It's the spoken word. There's no slides involved. It's usually not tailored, which seems a bit strange, but it's because it's a kind of standard formula. You can kind of riff around it. And again, this is very much trying to get your foot in the door, see if people are interested, and then you can follow up with a longer pitch or a standard presentation. So if we kind of warm up to the elevator pitch, I'll give you a formula for an elevator pitch, and we'll start with the slogan. It's usually a phrase. It often operates on an emotional level. It's memorable, and it really is an example of the power of less is more. Again, a little tip pointer here. This image, I quite like this image. It took me a fraction of a second to produce because it's from PowerPoint's own internal stock images, and you can get clip art there as well. So have a look. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel sometimes when you're putting together a presentation. So for a bit of fun, I thought I'd give you some examples of slogans and see how good you are at I want to keep on that. At identifying which companies have which slogans. If you want to play along, put your answers in the chat. So you have to be quick typers. I can't actually see the chat at the moment, so you'll have to. I'll take your word for it that you're answering it. So first slogan: A, the world's favorite airline. Second one: melts in your mouth, not in your hand. C, it seems a bit, dictatorial, this one. Just do it. Just do it. D, save money, live better. And E, it is. Are you? I think this is a clever one, this last one. But if I just reveal. So the first one, world's favorite airline, you might have remembered this one, is British Airways. Melts in your mouth, not in your hand. M&M's. I'm not sure whether Smarties had a similar one, but maybe they did. Just do it. Just do it. Nike or Nike. Save money, live better. Asda. And it is. Are you? The Independent newspaper. Are you independent? Obviously, you know, other newspapers, supermarkets, airways, and sweets and sport shoes are available. I don't appear to be endorsing any of those. So let's go on the halfway house between the slogan and the elevator pitch. So the mission statement. So the characteristics of this are, there's basically a few sentences. Could be for an external or an internal audience, or both. It talks about the priorities, values, and objectives of the organization, and particularly customers. And you'll notice that the slogans, some of the slogans were kind of addressing customer issues. And it's often inspirational or aspirational. So you can really give vent to your aims in the mission statement. So if we start with, again, if you want to play along at home, put your answers in the chat, and I'll reveal them at the end. So the first one is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It's quite a big mission statement, and it's useful. Well, I like that one. To help people around the world plan and have the perfect trip. Obviously, that was in better times before COVID, but it'll come back again. C, bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. If you have a body, you are an athlete. I don't think this company has really seen me recently, but you know, it's aspirational. That's what we've got to build on. And then to build the web's most convenient, secure, cost-effective payment solution. So your last chance to type in your answers, and I'll reveal which companies are which. So A is Google. Makes sense. We'll probably use that multiple times a day. To help people around the world plan and have the perfect trip, that's TripAdvisor. Bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. They're going to turn us all into athletes, and that's Nike, or Nike, however you want to pronounce that. And to build the web's most convenient, secure, cost-effective payment solution is PayPal. And as I said, there are other search agents and advisors and etc. I'm not giving my endorsement to any of those, but I do use Google. So let's move on to the formula for the elevator pitch. So I think there's really 4 steps. Firstly, introduce yourself. Then compose a phrase which explains the problem from the perspective of the customer. And then the third element is explain the benefit, give an example if possible. And finally, make your ask. It's all in vain unless you ask for something. And you could incorporate your mission statement into this. So I've given you an example there. So, hello, my name is Paul. I work for Supertech Limited. Our aim is to help the NHS manage the estimated 3 million people waiting to start treatment for cancer in the UK. St Bede's Hospital Basingstoke implemented our triage system, enabling them to see 55% more patients per day in their oncology department. Would you like my details so that you can find out more? That was, I've timed it a couple of times, that was about 25 seconds. So easily enough, I mean, and you can kind of work around it, you know, you could go, to, oh, what do you do? And they will tell you what you do. Oh, my name's Paul, blah, blah, blah. Nick also gave you his kind of pitch, if you like, which was the protocol. I mean, that is equally valid. I'm just giving you a formula because sometimes it's difficult to think, well, how am I going to get started on this? And if you start with the formula, you can change it to whatever you want, really. So we'll come on, again, I'm going to give you the formula now, and I'll talk around a couple of the issues that we see with the 3 to 5 minute pitch. After we break, we'll come back and we'll go through one of the companies that we've worked with has kindly offered to let us share their pitch with you, and we thought it was a very good pitch. So you'll kind of see a good example as well. But again, there's no more than 9 slides, and even less is probably better. I think Nick was talking about 7 or 8, because people just won't if we're sending that out to somebody on your behalf, they won't really look through more than that, and 3 minutes isn't a huge amount of time. So the first step, the first slide is introduce yourself, but don't introduce your product at this stage. You almost need permission to introduce your product, and in the formula you can see how your product or service fits in. So the second slide is really describing the problem your product or service aims to solve. That's really what your audience is interested in. You know, if they identify with the problem, then they're interested to see what your potential solution is. Difficulties we see around the problem statement are that it's not very well defined, it's not quantified. It is difficult sometimes to get data on disease conditions or treatment costs within the NHS, but you should make an attempt to do so. If the worst comes to the worst, you can actually get information on a freedom of information basis. I often say that the NHS, if you think it's difficult to get information on the NHS's business activities, think how difficult it is to sell to a private concern like Microsoft, because they really don't want to share details of their business with you. It might be commercially sensitive, whereas the NHS, a lot of the stuff is already in the public domain if you know where to look. And then the other problem I tend to see is, you know, if let's say there's a diabetes triage innovation, and they will describe the problem as diabetes, and diabetes costs 2 billion to the UK every year, or whatever the figure is. And really, the triage isn't solving the problem of diabetes. It will be solving a problem with the existing triage process. So maybe patients are lost, or in COVID times, you can't see people face to face. So be very specific about the problem that you want to solve, because when you get to slide 7, you want to link back your potential cost savings to that particular problem. So it won't be 2 billion, it won't be abolishing diabetes, it will be abolishing some of the costs associated with treating diabetes. So I've gone into a little bit of detail on the problem, because that's where people seem to have a little bit of a difficulty. Slide 3 is all about quantifying the cost of the problem. As I said, you know, you can get figures. That this is the as-is state, if you like, standard practice. Then you've kind of earned the right, if you like, to describe your product and service, but again, very brief. They may not want to know if it's cloud-based. Does that make a difference to whether it solves the problem or not? If it does, put it in. If it doesn't, it's just noise. The pitch is going to be very focused on your objective. How does it work? Keep that brief. It's great for us technologists, we love that. But if you're a procurement guy or lady, you might not be that interested at this stage. You'll have experts to look at that. What's the cost of your product or service? Roll that up on an institutional basis. You can break it down on a patient basis, but what the audience will be wanting to know is this an investment of £1,000 a year, £200,000 a year, £2 million a year, and does it fit my budget? So that's another thing. What are the cost savings or the clinical benefits to the NHS? Really important. And what evidence have you gathered to show it works? And then, very, very important, your ask. That's what you've been building up for. So it might be, can I talk to your clinical lead on this area to see whether it's of interest to them, or can we go further and try and talk about sales, or have you got any tenders coming up? You know, all of that kind of stuff. But again, it's surprising how many times people will go through all of those slides and then the ask is missing. So don't do that. That's the fundamental of a pitch. Inspirational quote time. I like this quote. I don't know whether he actually did get it wrong. I suppose he had a lot on his mind. Was it, it's one small step for man, or one small step for a man? But we're going to make that giant leap, and we're going to do this into pitching. The other thing about this quote that I like is the power of pause. You know, there's that pause. It's one giant leap for mankind. We had somebody pitched at one of our sessions to the heads of procurement, and they actually started with 10 seconds of silence. They said, hello. And then there was 10 seconds of silence, and they said, you know, that was 10 seconds of silence. Our innovation helps to deal with waiting lists. 10 seconds of silence is really long. But imagine how long it feels when you're waiting for treatment. And it really went down well. So pauses can be really, really good for getting your message across if you use them judiciously, put your right teeth in as well, and sparingly, and in an intelligent way. So I'll come on to confident delivery. How you can get that message across. I think structure is your friend in this. Nick's slide is very good at giving presentations anyway, but he's given that presentation numerous times. It really, you know, he knows what's coming next. If you follow the formula, it's a lot easier to control. You know where you are in your presentation. Be yourself, but be a bigger you. Don't try and put on a different persona. But particularly in person, it's difficult. I find it difficult through Teams and Zoom, because I tend to walk around a bit if I'm up in front of an audience. But you need to entertain people. You need to keep people engaged. Practice, practice, practice. The more times you do it, this is the first time I've run through this presentation in this form with these slides. And I feel a little bit nervous. Oh, I'm thinking, oh, how close am I to the end? Am I getting through it? A couple of tips on practice. I play a musical instrument. I play the flute. And what's true for practicing a musical instrument is the same for presentations. It's much more effective to do shorter practice sessions, more shorter practice sessions than a big 2 hours. You just start to lose focus. Also, what people tend to do on practicing is they'll run from the start of the presentation to the end, and what that means is usually you'll keep on going back to the start, and the start becomes very practiced. It's good to have a good start to your presentation. It can dictate how the rest of the presentation is going to unfurl, but you need to practice the end as well, because if you're up against the time constraint, you might start to feel a bit panicky, so you need to be confident on that. So what I would say is split it into thirds. Practice the end third, keep on, and then practice the end third again, and practice the middle third, or whatever, but do it in segments so that you don't over practice one little bit. And then the other thing which is a good takeaway from a musical instrument is, if you make a mistake at the end of your practice session, don't leave it on a mistake. Go back, get it right, and then get it right at least 3 times. There's something that trains your brain. If you stop on a mistake, you learn the mistake. It's like the last thing that you did sticks in your mind. So you've got to stop on a success and getting it right, and do that 3 times. Yeah, just that maybe that's personal choice, but I thought I'd share it. Say less with more impact. A few points on each slide, a lot more impactful. People remember it. And you'll notice with Nick's delivery, he had lots of text on the slides, but he was actually talking around it. So he was quite conversational. So don't read the text unless it's an example that you want to go through. Coping with nerves. I've gone through various periods presenting. I was quite confident at first, then I had a few nightmare presentations that knocked my confidence a bit, and I had to kind of get back up on that horse. I think it's important to remember that the audience is on your side. Nobody likes to see somebody, especially in person, struggling. So everybody is on your side. And another tip from playing a musical instrument is, especially a wind instrument, breathing is very important, and making sure that you're breathing properly, and you breathe from your diaphragm. And a teacher once told me, that if you think of the feeling that you have just before you're about to yawn, so you have that, it's almost like an involuntary intake of breath. If you do that a couple of times, you don't quite yawn unless you're not that bothered. Maybe the speaker in front of you don't really like and you want to yawn to put them off. But if you get that feeling, it does kind of relax you. It's really weird. It's really strange. So you could maybe try that. Also turn up on time and make sure that you're confident in what you're doing. That helps to calm the nerves. Learn from what goes well, and also learn from what doesn't. Now, just the final few slides. So I got this quote, and I thought it was quite a good one. There's no such thing as a missed sale of a stock. Either you sell to him, well, I'm paraphrasing, or he sells you his reason not to buy. Now, again, it's getting back to that kind of confrontational, salesy type attitude, which I don't really agree with. But there is a concept here of you're selling your reason to buy, but there is also a competing reason not to buy, and it's important to know that, to craft your reason better. And one of the things, and you will have more failures in pitching by its very nature than successes. You have to kiss a lot of frogs before you meet the prince. So how do you get some value out of a pitch that hasn't got you what you were hoping for in terms of an ask? So I think the first thing is to make a note. This is for a successful pitch or an unsuccessful pitch, actually. Make a note of all the questions you were asked and how you answered them. And that's for future reference. You build up a little data bank of, this is how I answer the questions. And mark yourself. Did I answer that well? Could I have done that a little bit better? Try and improve. With the questions that you weren't expecting, we do sometimes some debriefs with pitchers after they've pitched. And I always draw their attention to questions, the unexpected questions. So were you expecting that? I thought that was a strange question that was asked. And sometimes it indicates an aspect that you haven't thought about, maybe a regulation that you weren't aware of, and you need to take account of that and build it into your pitch for the next time. You can also obviously use it as to get an answer to questions that you need answered. Fundamentally, is there actually an unmet need for what you're supplying? Are there any competitors out there? What requirements haven't you met? Are there any barriers that you're unaware of? If somebody mentions something that you're not familiar with, don't try and bluff it. Say, oh, I'm not familiar with that. Is that an important criteria for you? Where would I find out more details about it? They're the experts. That's why they're raising that. And also, if it is unsuccessful, can you resubmit? Maybe they're not the right people. So can they suggest who you should be talking to? Ideally, make an introduction. And if it's not the right time now, when will it be the right time? So what are the procurement cycles? So final-ish slide. Beware of backdoor selling. I'll just put this up. In one of my roles as a technical person, we actually were trained to deal with salespeople that were trying to find out information to undermine the company's position in terms of negotiations. So get information, but do it in an ethically appropriate manner. And then just a little recap of what I've spoken about. So be clear on what your ask is. Make sure you're pitching to the right audience. And also, put in place some continuous improvements. So monitor your success and develop a winning formula. Keep a log of all your pitching episodes. What were the outcomes? If the objective was feedback on your idea, what was the level of audience engagement? And maybe you need to follow up with a questionnaire if you really do want feedback. So that's me. I tried to cover quite a lot. That wasn't a 3-minute pitch. I do apologize. We'll throw it open to any questions. Alessandro popped up to remind me not to carry on for too long. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. That was brilliant. I think it was a presentation full of advice, tips, not only for pitching, but also, in general for communicating your research, even like for example, in a fellowship interview and things like that, how to deliver it, how to present and put together some effective slides. So I think anyone would have appreciated all the advice. And if you have any question for Paul and Nick, please put them in the chat now. There was some already that were like mostly comments, but let's if there is no one that has got very urgent question, I can start and kick that off with a question for both Nick and Paul. So there was a comment in the chat, Nick, asking if you actually managed to get a deal with Harrods at the end. And I want to follow that up, asking, is it more difficult to get into Harrods or into the NHS?
I think it's more difficult to get into Harrods. we've had three meetings, and we're still going on. We almost got in, but the guy who met with us, a director called Saeed, he went off poorly with some personal issues, and he's now left. So we've got to pick up the pieces again and go again. So I'll have to put my skills to test to get these Egyptian healing rods into.
It's a very transferable skill, isn't it? Pitching and so on. And similarly, Paul, is it easier to pitch an innovation or to play a musical instrument?
I think depends on the person. For me, I think I'm probably fair to middling on both, actually. I'm not going to go and get my flute and give you a tune now. You'll be relieved. I will be relieved. Anyway, it's more nerve-wracking maybe playing a musical instrument in front of people.
Good. Now to the more serious questions in the chat. We got a question from Will Gregory. He's asking if, with regards to asking the right people, is your experience that if you are asking the wrong person, they will happily redirect you? So is that the case, or do you need to find the right person to pitch it to either of you? For the answer?
Ideally, it's good to go to the right person, just because you know you're not going to waste as much time. But my experience is that people will redirect you, and in fact. A lot of what Nick and I do are trying to direct people to the right people. So I remember somebody pitching an image compression innovation to us and said, the NHS will love this. You know, they produce a lot of images through PACS, etc., through you know, all of the X-rays, etc., MRI, and actually a lot of the systems were being supplied by the original equipment manufacturers that were making the X-ray machines. So we could redirect them and say, well, yeah, maybe, but actually you need to be talking to the companies that are producing the machines rather than the NHS. So a little bit of research, obviously, but people were, my experience. What do you think, Nick? Will people redirect happily? Redirect to? The right people.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I'm sorry about that, but I was reading Adam Featherstone's question there. I was making some notes as you suddenly put on me. No, I agree with you.
And if they're a little bit sensitive about giving you the names of people, then you can always just say, well, here's my pitch deck. Can you pass it on and ask them to get in touch with me if they're interested? So that's a kind of not putting them on the spot. So yeah, I think they do. Yeah.
Does Adam want me to answer that one? Or have you got any others that's before Adam, Alessandro?
No, I think that would be great. Do you want me to read that out, or are you going to summarize the question?
You can read it out if everybody else wants to hear it.
Yeah, I think also in the interest of the video recording that will go on YouTube, is great to read that out. So the question from Adam is about the winning formula and demonstrating value. Adam is working with an inventor who has an innovation which significantly improves patient safety and improves patient and clinical staff experience as well, but obviously it will cost a lot of money to implement. So the question for Nick is if he has any advice on how to quantify patient and staff benefit against money spent and procuring a new device.
So what we would do there, if Adam came to us with this particular inventor that he's working with, we would probably listen to what the product is, or what the innovation is. We'd look at what is in place now, and there might well be nothing, and they found a real big problem. So we'd work on what's the cost of running with the problem. Obviously, patient safety is a very big key thing within the hospital trusts, and at board level, patient safety is on the agenda in many instances, and it covers a wide range of, dishing out the wrong drugs, doing things wrong, those events that should never happen. So it's widely, discussed. So patient safety is key. So we would be wanting to know where does it fit in, and has there been somebody who's already started to have a look at this, because you've said, Adam, that it improves patient and clinical staff experience. So maybe it's been used somewhere to gain a bit of efficacy and evidence, and then we'd work on a value proposition as to, what this is the problem, and this is the cost to run with the problem. This is the solution to the problem, and this is how it works. This is what it does, and there's going to be a cost to it. And what we need to see is the cost of running with it now, and the cost of running it with what you've got. If there's a benefit there for the patients, remember that winning ticket. If it's the same price, better outcome, still good. If it's a slightly higher price, better outcome, still good. And if it's a lower cost and a better outcome, that's even better. So we would work with you and the inventor to hone all that so it's right, and get hold of the right people in the hospital setting to have a look at it and almost champion it to bring it in. And at the same time, we would be looking, or I would be looking at what frameworks are that out there for patient safety equipment or ideas or whatever. And whilst you're trying to build up your value proposition and gain champions using it, we'd be on another iron in the fire, trying to get you framework compliant so that hospital settings can buy the said innovation.
Fantastic. Adam, if you want to, okay, good. You're happy with that? Fantastic. So I don't know if I'm really a bad chair, or it's just the discussion is so interesting. We're running a bit out of time before the break, but there is a couple of more questions. Maybe we can go through them quickly, and then we'll have a short break and come back for the pitch. Is that okay for both of you, Nick?
Yeah.
So we have a question from Janet. She's asking if you need a confirmed proof of concept before pitching to both industry and NHS, and can you advise on which stage do you need to be to start doing this pitching in your innovation journey? So you need to be
Well, I'll do a quick one, Paul, and then you can follow. We've sometimes had people who've got an idea, and they've come and done a pit. They've come to us and say, we believe there's an issue here, and we've got this idea, and they haven't even got anything at that moment in time. So we can sort of help put them in touch with maybe somebody who makes plastic components, who can make a steel prototype, whatever. So the earlier the better, really, because sometimes we can help maybe save them some money by instead of going the wrong way. So there's a thing that I talk about: you can do the right thing right, you can do the right thing wrong, you can do the wrong thing right and the wrong thing wrong. A lot of people do them three.
I'd agree with Nick. I think any stage, it depends what you're asking for. And obviously you'd be asking for different things in the development cycle. The only thing I would say is make sure your IP, your copyright is protected. Just in case somebody comes back and say, well, you spoke to me about this and you stole my ideas, be very clear what the background IP is. But you can talk to people. It's your ask. You might be asking investors at an early stage, or you might be asking procurement when you're ready to sell. So,
quick one there, Alessandro, is Smafosa has said, what was your last mistake in pitching, and what lessons did you learn? Well, my last when I moved from procurement to selling procurement software in 2004 or 5, I was with the company till 2011, and I had to learn how to pitch and do what we're suggesting. And I did used to go down to, say, somewhere in London, and the company that I worked for, there were only 5 of us, was paying me to go all the way down there. I'd do a pitch or I'd do a presentation, and they'd all sort of like it. And I'd be coming driving home, and I'd get a phone call in the car. I had a plug-in thing and the speakers, and it would be my boss, who was Norwegian, and he would say, "Nick, how did it go today?" And I would say, "Oh, it went very well, you know, Jan." And he said, "Oh, did you get an order?" And I said, "Well, no." He said, "Well, how did it go?" And I said, and he asked me, and he said, "Nick, why are we paying you?" So that's quite frightening when the guy who runs the company says that. So straight after that, I realized that going all the way to London to show them something and then just coming home was the wrong thing to do. So Smafosa, that was my big learning, that was my mistake. So I got myself on a training course with 2 ex-IBM software sales guys, and it was the best thing I ever did. I was there, it was over 6 weeks, 2 days a week, and it was chinos and golf t-shirts, these older guys, and they taught me how to present, how to go and win the gig, how to present, how to use body language, how to smile, how to talk softly, how to raise my voice, and then hone in on the deal and get, you know, the ask at the end, what Paul just said then. What I want is, you know, for you to take this on board or do a trial for a week or whatever, get that ask and try and close on the deal and get the order. And I got it in 60 hospitals in the end. So that was my last mistake when the big man said, "Nick, why are we paying you?"
I'll give you a very brief one. My mistake, and I do it all the time, is I pitch the wrong people. If I'm networking, when I was working in wound care, guarantee I'd go and talk to somebody, and I didn't work for Smith & Nephew, but I'd speak to somebody and pitch them, and they'd say, "Oh, that's interesting. I work for Smith & Nephew. That is one of the competitors." So it was totally. But the lesson I've learned is to still pitch to everybody, because you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you get the prince, and don't be disheartened. But I can guarantee I'll choose the wrong person to pitch to if I'm given a free choice.
And sometimes, Smafosa, Paul and I are a bit of a double act, so we're both online with someone, and I'm an Evertonian and he's a Liverpool fan, so that right away there's a bit of a friction going on, and I always say he talks too much, and then sometimes he says
that's the other mistake I make. I'm working on that. I'll probably never get over that.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing the stories and the experiences that you had in doing a wrong pitch or a mistake in a pitch. And Janet, I hope that answered your question as well.
Yes, that was really clear. Thank you very much for clarifying that. I think when you're starting your journey, you're unsure, but that really helps to just say it doesn't matter what stage.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we have 15 minutes left on the call. Paul, Nick, do you think you can do that pitch example in 10 minutes so we can have a short 5 minutes break? Or is that okay? So perhaps we
no problem.
Are you going to drive, Nick?
I'll do it. I need to get it up, don't I? Just are you going for a break now? Are you?
I think we can have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right. I'll get it up now, ready.
Fantastic. So if you want to go and get a glass of water in this heat, that would be this would be the time to do it. We get back at 20 past for Nick to present a successful pitch. So putting into practice everything that we heard this morning, and then if there is time, we can do a further question and answer. But please go and get a glass of water, stay on the call, and we'll get back at 20 past. It's 20 past, so it would be great if we can get on with the session. And Paul and Nick will talk us through a successful pitch from a company called Coco. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
and
Coco, yeah.
Probably putting into practice all these advice that we received this morning. Paul and Nick, over to you.
Okay. So I won't take too long, but we asked permission from one of our SMEs that came through our Innovation Nexus platform in the last 6 to 9 months. Dr. Emma Stanmore, she's a Greater Manchester resident, and she's created a company called Keep On Keep Up. And when they first came to us, obviously they talk about it and everything, and then we send them a value proposition template, which is based upon what Paul's been talking about. What's the problem? What's the cost of running with the problem, etc., etc. So we're going to go through this. We looked at about quite a number of them, and we whittled it down, and then we picked on this one. And I think we picked on this one because Emma is from Manchester, and go through it. Think about what the problem is, and etc., and the ask at the end, and why we thought this one was so good. Okay, Paul.
So again, what we liked about this? It's quite a sparse slide. She's not over-egged the problem, and it's defined. So, you know, falls are the leading cause of injury and death in older people. That speaks very much to something the NHS will recognise. And then she's put down some quantification around the problem isn't just falls, it's the problem that it leads to hospital admissions and hip fractures. So it's creating a demand on the healthcare system. Also, very subtly at the bottom, she's put down her references. So I think it's a good problem statement. That's what we liked about this one.
And obviously, she's listened to us about what's the cost of running with the problem. And you'd be amazed at the amount of people who we give the template to, and they end up doing their own thing. And we say, well, where's the cost of the problem? It's funny, but she's really stuck to this. 2.3 billion. It beggars belief. Hip fractures, the most common injury. And when on that other slide, I didn't know this, 30% of people who have one, they end up passing, dying. It's frightening. Paul?
So yeah, okay. So as we've said, you've introduced the problem, so you've kind of got permission to talk around your solution. Again, it's quite sparse in terms of text, which is good. You can kind of absorb it quite quickly. And she's used some nice graphics here. So again, in terms of the look and feel, she's obviously, I said I'd chosen a template just to see what you could get with out of the box. And she's obviously put a lot of time and effort into this and got some professionally produced graphics. So it's quite appealing. And it illustrates the solution. So.
Yeah, and also I think they were little videos they play, and it shows you the guy doing some walking and stuff. Yeah, and obviously we talk about the benefits, and by doing these exercises reduces the falls by a third. And when you think of that 2.3 billion pound cost, if everybody in the hospital and around the country picked up on what she's suggesting, what Koku is suggesting, that would save an awful lot of money that could be used, in other places for other things that have issues. So it's a nice, easy read, benefits, competitor advantages, etc.
So again, in terms of the elaborating on the offer, the service. So she's pointed out some competitive advantages here. So it's continuing the narrative of why you should look at this as opposed to other ways of solving this problem. And again, when she goes through it, when she presents it, she doesn't get bogged down in the detail of this. She'll just pull out 1 or 2 or 3 points. But a slide like that is very versatile in terms of the audience. You could very easily see this being presented to a patient group or a clinical group or even procurement, depending on what you're saying over the top of the slide. So I thought this is a good slide.
And available in those languages as well.
Yeah, so yeah.
She goes on about that Cochrane review there, and also, the exercise. As we get older, it's very important to do exercises. And on the previous slide as well, when you sit, raise your heel. Do a few of those and stuff. So it's all strength and balancing. That helps.
So she just on the previous slide, so she was obviously that's the evidence side, and again she's building on that evidence side. So Orca, another reason we wanted to show this was because if you are thinking of creating apps, Orca is an app review organization. They work closely with the NHS, and they've got a standardized method of reviewing apps to get on the NHS library or some of the procurement frameworks. So again, it's a bit of a seal of approval. I might have mentioned in the talk about testimonials as well. So this is a bit like a standardized testimonial. So again, she's strengthening the case of why somebody should follow up with her on this.
Now it comes to the important bit we all want to know is how much does it cost? So it's £4 per user per month, £48 a year. And then she goes into show like what the costs are of, you know, a fall and what it, you know, the cost of a hip fracture, just to show that £48 plays against those costs. So it's a massive return on investment for investing on this program for the elderly, to get involved. You know, 20-1 falls prevention, amazing.
So she's just summarized the whole case here. And she's really, you know, this is kind of trying to seal the deal, if you like. So she's through the formula. She's just underlining the message, which is very good as well. You know, often we only remember the last thing that we've heard on a presentation. So she's put in the main points there. So again, I think she's changed our suggested formula slightly, but I think it's a good addition to it. So that's my comments on that.
There's also which is really good at these times, the COVID-19 benefit is doing all those exercises and learning about them, doing them at home on your, you know, you could put it on your tablet, on your phone, you could plug it into your smart TV, you could have a friend round, or you do, you know, obviously an elder person could do it with their daughter or someone in the family. The COVID-19 benefit is really key. We are on a push to keep people away from the hospital setting, an awful lot on remote monitoring and, you know, flagging up on dashboards in the hospital setting, you know, to help with the spread of the, you know, stopping the spread of this disease. And Paul?
Yeah, so the ask, if the, you know, my one takeaway on pitching is that's what defines a pitch. You've got an ask at the end. And the other thing is her conclusion slide, you know, you might have thought, well, you put the conclusions at the end, but no, put your ask at the end. That's, again, if the last thing, if people only remember one thing, it's the last slide, make sure it's your ask. And she can happily take questions around that as well. You know, she could just leave this on the screen at the end of the talk and people will look at it, you know, and she wants people to use it. And there's a little reference there for them to get more information. So
yeah, that's it. Stop the share.
That's great. So it was good to see all those tips and the formula and the template into practice. We ran out of time. If there is any question to Paul and Nick, this is your last chance to ask it, either in the chat or by raising your hand. Otherwise, I think I do have many questions for you guys, but I think we can get it offline anyway. Yeah. This meeting has been recorded, so it will be posted on the BRC YouTube channel. If there is any issue, Paul and Nick, in having that presentation from Coco onto the YouTube channel, let me know and I can edit that out. And in terms of pitching and giving you an opportunity to pitch, we're going to have another session in November in which participants to this scheme will have a chance to pitch their own innovation. So perhaps using all these tips, and maybe we can get Nick and Paul involved in that session as well. I'll be in touch with you guys around that. So we're taking a break in the summer. We're gonna have the next session at the end of September. I think it's on the 21st of September, and that will be around commercialization as a route to clinical impact. Without further ado, I would like to thank again Nick and Paul for the brilliant presentation, all the advice from today, and thank you everyone for joining, and see you after the summer. Enjoy the sunshine.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
See you, everybody. Thanks for
Cheerio. Bye now.